everyone, and thank you for attending tonight's informational community meeting. My name is Shipra Rajesh, Associate Planner in the Community Development Department. This informational meeting is intended to provide an overview of the proposed updates to the city's regulations on single family residential development standards. With me tonight are members of the city planning and building staff. They include Assistant Community Development Director Fred Ramirez, Deputy City Planner Scott Plambach, Senior Planner Amanda Landry, Senior Plan Check Engineer Russell Friesland, and Assistant Planner Xavier Thomas. This slide provides the agenda for tonight's meeting. As noted, this meeting is a 2-hour meeting that will start at approximately 6 p.m. and conclude at 8 p.m. During the first 30 minutes of the meeting, the city planning staff will present the proposed updates to the single-family residential development standards. From 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m., the city will take questions and comments from the public. A maximum of 3 minutes will be provided for each speaker. Questions and comments can be submitted in writing via Zoom's Q&A feature. Staff will be responding to the questions during the meeting. Questions that cannot be addressed during the meeting will be responded to as a part of an update to the City Council on the outcome of the informational community meeting. The city responses will be made available on the city's website as soon as they are completed and prior to the upcoming March 15, 2022 City Council meeting. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the city's YouTube channel as well. The recorded meeting will also be made available for viewing on the city's website in the coming days. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to walk you through the different options available for sharing questions or comments. Once the staff presentation ends, you will get an opportunity to ask questions by using the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. If you have called into this meeting through Zoom, you can raise your hand by dialing *9 on your phone once we open it up for questions. In addition, there is a Q&A feature on the bottom of your computer or cell phone screen. At any time during the meeting, you can submit a question by clicking the Q&A icon. We will do our best to respond to some of these questions during the meeting, but all questions that are sent in through the Q&A will be compiled and eventually posted on the city's website with responses. You can also send in comments or questions anytime following the meeting to the email address on the screen. The purpose of this meeting is to inform the community about the proposed zone text amendment that updates the regulations on single-family R1 and R1H zones and provide an opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback on the proposed code amendments. As a part of the previous updates to the single-family regulations in 2017, the City Council directed the staff to report back with an update on the effectiveness of the updated single-family zoning regulations. In the past 5 years, city staff has received feedback from applicants, homeowners, and the general public regarding the lengthy processing time and the uncertainty with the single-family residential development process since the adoption of the current regulations. The ZTA proposes updates that will incorporate objective design standards that are uniformly applicable to all single-family residential projects to maintain the regulation of the mass and bulk of all new residential dwellings. These updates seek to build upon the 2017 regulations while providing objective development standards that maintain local control in light of recent updates to the state law that threaten the character of the city's single-family residential neighborhoods. Additionally, the proposed code updates will shorten the planning review time, facilitate efficient customer services, and provide more clarity to the applicants and homeowners seeking to remodel, add on, or build a single-family residence per city regulations. This slide provides an overview of key updates that are being proposed as a part of the ZTA, which includes updates to the city's single-family zoning regulations to apply objective development standards uniformly to all additions remodels, and new construction of single-family residences, and allowing streamlined review of all projects through the city's plan check process in lieu of a lengthy single-family special development permit process. Incorporating the guidelines from the neighborhood compatibility checklist as additional objective design standards applicable to all projects that address front entry design, facade details, privacy, mass and bulk, exterior lighting, and prohibited materials. And finally, increase the top of the plate height of single family dwellings from 20 feet to 22 feet to address homeowner and applicant concerns with reduced floor to ceiling heights resulting from raised foundations and grade variations across lots. I will provide more details about these updates in the following slides. This slide provides an overview of the existing single-family special development permit process. SFS-DP discretionary approval contains design guidelines for neighborhood compatibility review that were established to address concerns regarding mass and bulk of new single-family homes and additions. Currently, projects that propose construction of new dwellings that are below 0.35 FAR and under 3,000 square feet floor area, and projects that include additions that are not visible from the street, regardless of the size, or additions that are under 500 square feet in area, all these projects are exempt from the design review process, and a homeowner can initiate a plan check process. That entails review by different city departments, including planning, to ensure compliance with the city's zoning and building codes in order to obtain a building permit. However, if a project proposes a home that exceeds 0.35 FAR or 3,000 square feet area, or projects that includes a remodel resulting in a whole house demolition or additions that exceed 500 square feet and are visible from the street, such projects are subject to a discretionary review process, where plans are reviewed by planning to ensure compliance with design guidelines. And if a project complies with the design guidelines, a public notice is mailed out to all the residents within 300 feet radius of the project site with information regarding the proposed development, a decision date, as well as the appeal period. A homeowner can initiate a plan check process after the end of the appeal period. The total time for the discretionary review process is around 12 to 16 months. The proposed updates will codify the neighborhood compatibility design guidelines into objective standards that will be uniformly applied to all single-family residential projects, and not just to those projects that exceed a certain FAR or square footage, enabling a streamlined review of all single-family residential additions, remodels, and new construction. The objective design standards will become part of Burbank Municipal Code, and as a result, a homeowner can straightaway initiate a plan check process to verify compliance with all applicable development standards and obtain a building permit for their single-family project. As previously noted, the proposed updates do not eliminate any existing design-related development standards. In fact, unlike the current process, all single-family development projects will have to comply with existing and proposed objective standards, ensuring that mass and bulk of a dwelling is consistently regulated across all single-family residential development projects. The proposed update will remove the existing ambiguity from the code because objective standards can only be interpreted one way. Compliance with these objective standards will be verified during the plan check process. The uniform applicability and interpretation of the objective development standards and the resulting streamlined approval process will reduce the planning review time to 3 to 8 months. The next few slides will provide an overview of existing design guidelines, which are applied to projects undergoing a discretionary review process, and the corresponding objective development standards replacing these design guidelines. On the slide, the design guidelines contained in the neighborhood compatibility checklist are listed under the left side column of the blue table, and the corresponding objective standards that are either existing or have been created to achieve the same result as the design guidelines are indicated on the left side of the table, the left column. The existing standards are indicated in black text, and the red text represent new or revised standards that have been incorporated as a part of this update. Pictured below are the table excerpts of the design guidelines from the Neighborhood Compatibility Checklist. This is Table A. Table A of Neighborhood Compatibility Checklist talks about required front, side, and rear yard setback for any new addition or a new construction. It also provides guidelines on screening requirement to maintain privacy between adjoining properties. Objective development standards to address front, side, and rear setbacks, including upper story modulations and plane breaks, are currently addressed by the existing code. And with this update, we will apply it to all single-family residential projects. Moreover, the update proposes addition of a new objective standard on screening requirement. Table B of the Neighborhood Compatibility Checklist provides guidelines on design and orientation of front entrance of a dwelling. A homeowner has to comply with only one out of the four guidelines specified under Table B. The zone text amendment proposes objective standards for front entry design by placing a limit on the maximum allowed height of a front porch to 12 feet and incorporating language in the code that specifies the location and orientation of front entrance, as well as minimum dimensions of a front porch. As proposed, the zone text amendment establishes objective development standards that implement all the four design guidelines that you see under Table B. Table C provides guidelines on orientation and design of garages. Specifically, it talks about the garages being subordinate to the overall mass and bulk of a primary dwelling. Existing objective development standards within the city's zoning regulations incentivizes a homeowner to build garages towards the rear of a lot by allowing a greater FAR exemption. Additionally, there are existing standards that limit the width of the front-facing garage to 50% of the width of a dwelling and require front-facing garages to be set back at least 10 feet from the front facade of the main dwelling to ensure that garages are subordinate to the overall mass and bulk of a primary dwelling. Both the guidelines within the Table C of Neighborhood Compatibility Checklist are addressed in the current zoning regulations as applicable objective development standards that must be met by all single-family development projects. Table D provides guidelines on roof modulations and encourages provision of intersecting and multi-level ridge lines along a roof of a dwelling. This guideline is currently implemented using the upper story step back and plane break modulations specified in the city's single-family residential zoning regulations and is applied to those projects that are subject to SFSDP discretionary review process. The ZTA would expand the applicability of these development standards to all residential projects, thereby ensuring that all two-story single-family development projects comply with the roof modulation requirements that you see on Table D here. Table E of the Neighborhood Compatibility Checklist Review provides guidelines on front and side facade modulations of a dwelling. As previously mentioned, the zone text amendment would expand the applicability of the upper story step back and plane break modulations specified in the code to all single-family projects, ensuring that all two-story single-family development projects comply with plane breaks and modulation requirement. Furthermore, as previously noted, under the existing single-family residential standards, projects that propose new single-family construction that are under 0.35 FAR or under 3,000 square footage, and additions that are under 500 square feet, as well as projects proposing additions that are not visible from the street, regardless of the size, do not have to comply with upper story modulation requirements. With this update, upper story modulation would be a requirement for all single-family projects. Table F emphasizes a preference for single-story residential additions and single-story construction. This option is checked or highlighted when a homeowner submits an application for a single-story addition or new construction. And as such, no findings are required for this item. The existing code incorporates height standards that are being retained to regulate the overall height of single-family dwellings within the city. Table G, which is applicable to all two-story additions and construction, provides guidelines on height transitions to regulate mass and bulk of a dwelling. screening for maintaining privacy between adjoining properties, and reducing the square footage of the upper story addition. The guidelines do not specify any details regarding proportion of the second story as it relates to the area of the first story. A homeowner is required to meet only 3 out of the 4 guidelines shown on this table. The ZTA provides objective development standards on screening and limiting the upper story area to 85% of the first floor gross floor area. Please note that the 85% upper story square footage limit is already existing in the code and currently applies only to those projects that are subject to a discretionary review. The proposed updates will require all single-family projects to comply with this requirement. The height limit requirement for the front porches, as well as expanding the applicability of the upper story step backs and plane break modulations, will address the height transition requirement along the front and side facade of a dwelling. As previously noted, all single-family residential projects will be required to comply with these objective development standards. Table H discourages third-story additions, and as such, no findings are required for this item. As previously mentioned, all single-family dwellings are required to comply with the height standards specified in the code, which doesn't accommodate height for a third-story addition. Table I of Neighborhood Compatibility Checklist provides guidelines on window design and 360-degree design consistency along all the facades of a dwelling that are visible from the street and adjoining dwellings. A homeowner is required to comply only with 1 out of the 4 guidelines indicated in Table I. The Zone Text Amendment incorporates objective development standards in the code by requiring windows and doors along 20% of the area of street-facing facades of a dwelling that will be applicable to all single-family projects, ensuring that design of a dwelling incorporates plane breaks along visible facades. Additionally, a standard providing a list of prohibited materials is being proposed to ensure higher quality design for all single-family dwellings. Table J provides guidelines on accessory structure design. This table is used when a project includes construction of a detached accessory structure. Standards regulating height and location of accessory structures are already present in the code, and these standards are applicable to all single-family residential projects. Table K provides guidelines on walls, fences, hedges, and retaining walls. These guidelines are currently implemented using the objective development standards that already exist in the city's single-family residential zoning regulations. Objective development standards regulating height, location, and design of block walls, fences, hedges, and retaining walls are included in the current single-family residential zoning code. The proposed updates clarify some ambiguity and conflicting language in the current code. All single-family projects are required to comply with the existing as well as the updated standards. Table L provides guidelines on landscaping and tree requirement, which are implemented using objective development standards that are already present in the city zoning and development codes. All single-family development projects are required to comply with these standards. Table M provides guidelines on landscape design, exterior lighting, and landscape screening for privacy. A homeowner is required to comply with only 3 out of the 7 guidelines specified in this table. Burbank Municipal Code includes standards that regulate the landscape design for single-family lots. Additionally, objective design standards on screening requirement and exterior lighting have been included as a part of the proposed zone text amendment. These standards would continue to be applicable to all single-family residential development projects. Finally, Table N provides guidelines on architecture and design of a dwelling. The Zone Text Amendment incorporates objective development standards to regulate mass and bulk of a dwelling by requiring plane break modulations for all single-family projects, limiting square footage of the upper story to 85% of the first story area for all single-family projects, limiting the top of the roof height of front porches to 12 feet, again for all the projects, and requiring windows along street-facing facades, and listing materials that are prohibited to ensure higher design for all single family residential projects, higher quality design. In summary, all the design guidelines that are a part of the neighborhood compatibility checklist are proposed in the zone text amendment to be included as objective development standards within the single family residential zoning regulations. As mentioned before, the proposed zone text amendment does not eliminate any of the existing development standards that already implement a majority of the design guidelines. In fact, the proposed ZTA would require all single family development projects to comply with these guidelines as codified objective development standards that are verified as a part of city's plan check review process. One of the key updates includes a proposed increase in the maximum allowed top of the plate height for single family dwellings from 20 feet to 22 feet. This has been proposed to provide design flexibility to all the single family dwellings that are built on raised foundation and to allow a homeowner to accommodate 8 to 10 feet interior ceiling height along the second story on dwellings that are built on raised foundation or are located on lots which have varying slopes across the length or width of the lot. Please note that no changes are proposed to the maximum allowed top of the roof height, which is limited to 30 feet. The changes to the maximum allowed top of the plate height will allow greater design flexibility because the code requires that the top of the plate height for a dwelling be measured from the natural grade or finished grade, whichever is lower, which makes it very restrictive to accommodate an 8 or 10 feet ceiling height when a house is built on a raised foundation or is located on a sloped lot that is characterized by changes to the grade. The next two slides will provide examples to indicate how a 22 feet top of the plate height can benefit a house if it is located on a raised foundation or a sloped lot. This slide shows rendering of two different single family dwellings. On the left side is a single family home that has a top of the plate height of 20 feet and a top of the roof height of 26 feet with minimal modulation. Towards the right of the slide is a home that is taller because it's built on raised foundation. It has a 22 feet top of the plate height and a top of the roof height of 28.5 feet. However, the dwelling on the right looks less bulky when compared to the dwelling on the left because it is well modulated. It has a front porch that is subordinate in height to the overall dwelling, and a 22 feet top of the plate height helps in accommodating a 10 feet interior height along the first floor and a 9 feet interior height along the second floor. This is another example of a house where a 20 feet top of the plate height creates a hindrance to accommodate a 9 feet interior height along the first story and an 8 feet interior height along the second story. This house is located on a lot where the lot slopes down as one moves from left to right. As you can see, the top of the plate height on the left portion of the house is at 19 feet 9 inches, and towards the right of the house, the resulting top of the plate height is at 21 feet and 9 inches. Because a 20 feet top of the plate height will not be able to accommodate a 9 feet and an 8 feet interior height along the first and second story of the house. The proposed increased plate height would facilitate floor to ceiling heights of 8 to 10 feet for first and second floors that are otherwise limited under the current code for homes with raised foundation or homes built on sloping building pads. The next few slides will provide an overview of other non-building related updates that are being proposed as a part of the zone text amendment. The zone text amendment proposes updates to the definition of retaining wall and whole house demolition. Updates have been proposed to the definition of retaining wall to include a reference grade, which is currently missing from the code. The reference grade is lowest abutting finish grade, and text is included to specify that only portion of the retaining wall which is exposed or is located above ground will be considered for the purposes of measuring height. This update will facilitate consistent application of code for measuring height of a retaining wall. The definition of whole house demolition is being updated to include demolition of only exterior walls and openings of a main dwelling, and other accessory structures that are attached to the main dwelling. Demolition of exterior walls and openings better represent the alteration of mass and bulk of a dwelling, while providing greater flexibility to the homeowners to tailor the interior floor plan to their household needs. Additionally, updates are proposed to limit the maximum allowed top of the roof height of front porches attached to the main dwelling to 12 feet. A front porch that is subordinate in height to the overall height of the main dwelling creates a sense of transition between the front yard and the interior of the home and reduces the overall mass and bulk of the front facade of a house. Furthermore, updates include streamlined review and approval of pools and spas that are proposed on flat portions of a hillside lot with a slope less than 5%. This update will reduce the planning approval time for these projects from 6 to 8 months to a few days or even over the counter approval. The zone text amendment includes updates to increase the maximum allowed width of driveways within the front yard setback for lots where the garages are located towards the rear of the main dwelling, from 12 feet to 20 feet, as long as the hardscaping in the front yard setback area is limited to 45%. This increase in driveway width will facilitate accommodation of additional area for off-street parking within the lot. Please note that no changes are being proposed to the maximum allowed width of a driveway approach in order to preserve the amount of existing curbside on-street parking area. Additionally, updates include use of whole house demolition in place of replacement cost as a trigger for determining if demolition of a main dwelling triggers update to the existing non-conforming off-street parking. Determination of replacement cost is challenging during planning review and requires input from Building and Safety Division. Additionally, it is difficult to determine the accuracy of replacement cost. Based on input from the city's structural engineers and plan checkers, the whole house demolition is easy to calculate during planning review, and accuracy of whole house demolition calculation can be verified easily during building and planning review. Per the current code, attic spaces that exceed 4 feet in height and that are characterized by a structural floor are included within FAR calculation. Determining if an attic space includes a structural floor is challenging during planning review, and such a determination requires input from Building and Safety Division. Additionally, the code does not clearly list all the structures that are exempt from FAR calculation and lot coverage calculation, which creates confusion among applicants. Updates are proposed to the FAR section of the code to include all attic spaces with floor surface that exceeds 5 feet in height within FAR calculation. Additional changes are proposed to list all the structures that are exempt from FAR calculation in order to avoid confusion and enable consistent application of the code. These include detached accessory structures that are open on all sides, understory of balconies and overhangs that are not supported by posts, trellises, and similar structures that have roofs that are at least 50% open to the sky with uniformly distributed openings, up to 2 non-habitable accessory structures that are under 120 square feet, and in case of multiple garages, the one with the lesser area or square footage will be exempt from FAR. This update will codify staff's current interpretation of the FAR exemption as it has been applied to the noted structures over the past 5 years. Furthermore, consistent with the changes to the FAR subsection, up to 2 non-habitable accessory structures that are under 120 square feet will be exempt from lot coverage. Please note that no changes are proposed to the maximum allowed FAR and lot coverage. The zone text amendment is proposing updates to the fence, walls, and hedges section of the code to remove inconsistencies and simplify the language for better clarity. No changes are being made to the maximum allowed height of walls, fences, or hedges. Following updates are being proposed to the regulation on fences, walls, and hedges, allowing up to 2 entry gates along the front yard setback, clarifying the language of the existing code to clearly specify that height of fences in combination with a retaining wall along front yard setback is limited to 4 feet as measured from finished grade or natural grade, whichever is lower. Specifying a reference grade for measurement of height of regular walls, fences, and hedges. That will be measured from finished grade or natural grade, whichever is lower. And allowing up to 2 retaining walls in the front yard setback. No changes are proposed to the maximum height, setback, and separation requirement for retaining walls in the front yard. Other updates to the regulations on fences, walls, and hedges include allowing replacement of damaged, legal non-conforming retaining walls to previous height and location, allowing exceptions from existing retaining wall standards with an approval of a minor or a major fence exception permit for non-hillside lots. And additionally, text has been added to specify that exceptions will not be granted for retaining walls located within the front yard setback area of a lot. Updates to the regulations on fences, walls, hedges, and retaining walls for the hillside lots include allowing up to 2 retaining walls in the front yard setback area, which is consistent with the non-hillside regulations. Language has been included to allow by right approval of code-compliant fences, walls, and hedges that are located outside the front yard setback area of a lot. And a major or a minor fence exception permit will be required to allow exceptions from existing standards for walls, hedges, or fences. Additionally, language has been proposed to specify that a hillside development permit discretionary review process will be required to allow exceptions from retaining wall standards on a hillside lot. The zone text amendment proposes updates to the code section on continuation of non-conforming structures. A non-conforming structure is defined as a building or portion of a building that was lawful when constructed, but which does not conform to today's zoning standards. Currently, the code does not allow creation of doors and windows along non-conforming walls of a dwelling. Demolition of portions of non-conforming walls to create an opening results in loss of legal non-conformity, requiring the entire non-conforming portion to comply with the current standards at a significant cost and alteration to the building footprint and the affected elevation. Additionally, the current code does not allow restoration and reconstruction of non-conforming portions of a residential structure that have been destroyed due to termites and dry rot. This is an issue because most of the times property owners are unaware of such damages, which are encountered during ongoing construction. Requiring non-conforming portions of a house that have been damaged due to termites or dry rot to comply with the current standards prolongs planning approval time and results in financial hardships for homeowners. As a result, staff is proposing to allow by right approval of new openings that are limited to 50% of linear length of the wall along non-conforming exterior walls. Additionally, staff is recommending allowing by right replacement of legal non-conforming portions of a dwelling that has been damaged due to dry rot or termites, subject to ongoing compliance with applicable building and fire codes. Pursuant to the city's zone text amendment process, an initial planning board hearing was held on October 25th, 2021 to consider the proposed updates to regulations on R1 and R1H single-family residential zones. At the public hearing, Planning Board considered staff's recommendation. After deliberation on the project request, the Planning Board recommended changes to the updates proposed as a part of the ZTA. That included elimination of single-family special discretionary review process and incorporation of the associated design guidelines as objective development standards within the code to allow streamlined review and approval for all single-family projects, including additions, remodels, and new residential construction on all the lots that are not located in the designated hillside area of the city. A second planning board hearing was held on December 13, 2021, to consider the updated ordinance after incorporating all the changes recommended by the board. The board considered the updated ordinance and after deliberation voted unanimously 4-0 and approved the recommending the proposed updates to single-family residential zoning regulations to the City Council. The City Council considered the proposed zone text amendment at two public hearings held on February 8th and 15th. After public comment and deliberation on the zone text amendment, the City Council directed staff to hold an informational community meeting prior to a second reading of the ordinance for the zone text amendment that is scheduled for March 15th, 2022. Information regarding the previous four public hearings on the zone text amendment are posted on City's website. In conclusion, staff would like to reiterate that the zone text amendment will not eliminate any of the existing R1 and R1H objective development standards. The zone text amendment proposes updates to R1 and R1H zoning to, number one, preserve existing neighborhood character in the single-family residential zones by incorporating design guidelines from the neighborhood compatibility checklist as new objective development standards and identifying those standards that already implement these guidelines as a part of planning review. Number two, apply all objective development standards consistently to all additions, remodels, and construction of single-family dwellings with no exceptions. And number three, enable efficient customer service by streamlining planning review time for construction of all single-family dwellings, including remodels, additions that comply with the applicable objective development standards, and removing inconsistencies from the existing regulations. Noted on this slide is the next step in the processing of the proposed zone text amendment. As noted, the City Council will consider the proposed ZTA at a noticed public hearing on Tuesday, 15th March 2022. That concludes the presentation. Thank you for your time. We will now open it to meeting participants to ask any questions that you may have regarding the proposed zone text amendment.
Thank you very much, Shipper, for the presentation. Due to the presentation going over the 6:30 mark, we will be extending the community meeting a little past 8 o'clock to just accommodate for any questions that may come after that. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand now. We will start with the first person, Emma. You have 3 minutes. Please unmute and then ask your question.
Hi, this is Emma. I would like to, I'm not sure if it's only questions or comments also. I would like to also first thank you, the board, to trying to shorten the length of the approvals needed for someone to do a remodeling. Because as you know, the house pricing has increased so much and the rents are so expensive. So a family with, trying to get in a house, waiting for all of this to be done, it's a big burden of paying rent and paying mortgage while this is getting done. So I would like to really appreciate the board and the city council and everyone that you are working towards shortening the length of this time, because it really makes a very big difference. Second of all, I would like to say that as a Burbank resident of more than 30 years, I'm proud of being a Burbank resident, and I really enjoyed my life in here. I'm still a resident of Burbank. And I would like you to know that even though I'm very much for keeping the, a nice environment and make sure that dwellings and single family homes are built to the standards, but I would like to also make sure that we need to move with the time and make sure that we are not falling behind, so that Burbank always is a place that people want to invest and want to buy homes and want to come and live in. That's very important. Also, what you are considering about sloped land and also the height is very appreciative, because it makes a very big difference. I know that everything was designed a couple of years ago, few years ago, but only after something is applied, then we know what went wrong with it. And it happens that I work with a very, very big corporation, and always, after we do something, we then notice that, we missed this one, So it's very important that you are looking into increasing the height because it definitely will make a big difference. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, for your comments.
Thank you very much. We will go on to the next person. Bindi, if you can, please unmute. And if you have any questions or comments, go on ahead.
Bindi, make sure you're unmuted. I'm not able to hear you. No.
Nope, still cannot hear you. Okay. Well, if you can, just try to fix that and we will come right back to you. Next person on the list, Mr. Jim Casey. If you can, please go on ahead and have any questions or comments that you may have.
Yes, good evening, staff. I have a series of questions here. First is, how many appeals against approved single-family development projects have been filed since the guidelines have been in place? Second question is, what is the maximum allowed raised foundation height? I know the minimum, I believe, is about 18 inches, but I don't know what the maximum is. Third question, one assumes there have been a considerable number of homes that have completed the single-family development process in the past 4.5 years. How many have been approved, and what is the biggest difference between those projects that get approved quickly and those that do not? How many plan checks and rechecks are allowed without additional fees per project? There have been different answers given to how ADU permits applications are being handled. Residents who've been waiting for other permits have been told by staff that an overwhelming number of ADUs are backing up everything. But during the city council meeting, staff told us that ADUs are being outsourced and have no impact on the backlog. Can you clarify this? How many plan checkers were on staff before the IDCO, and how many are on staff now? How much turnover has there been in this department? And how is COVID and virtual plan checking, staff turnover, and retraining contributing to the backlog in plan approvals? Does the planning department have plan checkers that are assigned specifically to single-family development permit projects that are given extra training so they can better explain the process and issues with builders and homeowners? Or are all plan checkers supposed to be able to address the smallest permits, replacing a dishwasher, to whole house teardowns? Is there a division dedicated to smaller projects that is not bogged down by the SFDP applications? And if so, how many? My final question, because I have an architectural background, is how does adding 2 feet to the top plate of every 2-story home being built reduce bulk and mass when those represent a 10% increase in the height of the walls and the size of the box? In the staff report, it was claimed that raising the top plate would allow for steeper roof pitches in keeping with the current neighborhood, whereas raising the top plate without raising the maximum roof height would create lower roof pitches. Raising the walls does not raise the roof pitch, it lowers it. And my final comment is the illustration you showed showing that the higher top plate reduced the mass, I would completely argue in the opposite. That home looked much boxier and much larger than the one it was being compared to. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Mr. Casey. I'm going to attempt to address each of these, and Russell, Fred, feel free to chime in. So in total, since the adoption of the updated regulations back in 2017, we've had 6 appeals. The maximum allowed raised foundation, I am not aware of that number. I'm sure senior plan checker Russell will be able to address that, but usually we see somewhere between 1.5 feet to around that number for the raised foundation. And I'm sure Russell will be able to provide you with the idea what is the maximum allowed raised foundation height. The third question you asked, how does few planning entitlements end up, getting processed faster, and why some of them take more time? Well, it depends on a lot of factors. Depends on the scope of the work, depends on the applicant and the way they're able to add the staff's comment and update the plans. A lot of times the back and forth causes a long, it elongates the processing timing for these planning and entitlements. And then the mailing out of the public notices and those to the whole process, where it includes waiting for the appeal period to end. That overall takes around 3 months. That takes a big chunk of time. So to give a direct answer to your question, it depends on the scope of the project and the applicant and how well they're able to implement staff's recommendation. The next question that you had, how many plan checks and rechecks for, I believe, for planning entitlement? So once a homeowner applies for single family special development permit, they are not required to pay more. Once they submit, we review the plans. We go through IDRC comments, and then we respond back to them. If there is any issue, the back and forth happens, but that is all part of the design guideline process, wherein the homeowner is given comments regarding their design, and they move forward to implement it. So we don't charge an extra fee for back and forth at the planning entitlement phase, back and forth with the planner, I mean. The next thing, staff training, COVID issues. I'm not sure how it's related to the R1 updates, but as you might be aware, now we are reviewing all the plan checks on our online project doc system, which has worked very well. And I don't think that has caused any tremendous delay in reviewing of the plans. If I personally were to talk about me, it has been quite helpful. The next one is plan checkers specifically assigned. And again, Russell, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have plan checkers who are specifically assigned to look into just the single families or, particularly for commercial. I'm not sure, but I don't think there's any such categorization. Regarding your question about the top of the plate increase and mass and bulk, sure, the top of the plate height increase from 20 to 22 feet might add more mass, that is the area in terms of height, but the bulk portion will be regulated by using modulations and plane breaks. Oftentimes, when you walk past a home, it is not the mass of the home that makes it look unappealing. It is how you regulate that mass that makes the difference and gives a good pedestrian experience. In dealing with the current regulations for past 5 years, we realized that the current top of the plate restriction created more hindrance in terms of the interior ceiling height requirement for homeowners who wish to have, say, 8 or 10 feet, interior ceiling height. So the idea behind, or the intent behind giving them an extra 2 feet is not to create a very bulky looking building, because we are putting in regulations by expanding existing upper story step back modulations to all homes and making sure that any house will have to comply with those modulation and will not end up looking bulky. So a 2 feet top of the plate height increase would not contribute to increased bulk. No, it won't. And then your last comment about roof pitch, yes, we are aware that raising walls increases the roof pitch. So when this was put in place, it was mainly for those homes which are on slope lot or on raised foundations. But it also incentivizes certain architectural styles, like a Tudor architectural style. Someone who wishes to put that or implement that for their home, and they can play around with the numbers to and stay within the limit of 30 feet and 22 feet to achieve the kind of home they want. So overall, the concern, the main intent behind the single family special development permit was to regulate mass and bulk. And we believe we put in place all the standards from the design guidelines and now making it mandatory for every single family home to comply with it. And we believe that in doing so, it would definitely will continue to regulate mass and bulk, especially the bulk part, which I think was your concern with the top of the plate increase, and also provide flexibility to homeowners who wish to see a certain design for their homes. Fred, Russell, feel free to chime in if I missed anything.
I just want to just add a couple of things with regards to responses. There was some questions about staff workload. We do some of the single family special development permits within the planning division are provided to consultants to assist us with review to try to, and that's because there's other work that the planning staff has to do. So the entire planning staff, they do process single family. To go to the other question about staff turnover, we do train our staff up on the single family review process and on the single family review code. But due to workloads with not only with the single family and others, we farm some of our single family development permits out to try to get those processed. And we do work closely with the consultants to do that. I believe there was also a question about the number of plan checkers. And when you mentioned plan checkers, Mr. Casey maybe referred to the plan checkers within the building division. And there were 4 plan checkers before the ITCO, and now we just hired another one, and I believe we have 6. Correct me if I'm wrong, Russell. We have 6 plan checkers now within the building division to assist with all plan checks, not just for single family.
And Scott, if I can, this is Fred. Just to add a couple of other components that are being added that Shipra mentioned, as far as limiting the porch overall maximum height of the porch to 12 feet. That's also going to reduce kind of the overall bulk of the building. So in some of the comparisons that have been used in the past, you've seen a 2-story porch versus what could be built under the proposed improvements. In addition to that, I think Shipra mentioned multiple times those projects that are currently exempt from the modulation and plane break requirements. And under the proposed code amendment, that would not be the case. All projects from add-on to a remodel with expansion, as well as new construction, even if it's under 0.35 and 3,000, would have to comply with all the plane break modulations and all the limitations that are being included, as well as the fact that, as Shipra noted, all the guideline requirements have been in essence codified as objective standards, both what's already in the code as well as the additional components that further limit bulk and mass when it comes to the overall project and incorporate those design features that were envisioned under the guidelines. But now it's measurable, now it's clearly understood what's required, and those are applicable to all projects going forward. One other thing I think that was brought up, there was a reference to ADUs and somehow ADUs affecting the review times. Last year, the council actually approved funds to actually outsource the ADU reviews since those have to be completed within 60 days. They've also funded single family since there was a backlog of those that needed to be reviewed, and those have been outsourced. Staff works on an ongoing basis with the consultant planners that are working on those, but even those consultant planners have found difficulty in interpretations of the code and presenting those to applicants. So that's why we're here tonight, is that we think there are ways, per the board's recommendation, to provide greater clarity, streamline the process, and as that happens, to actually focus on processing those in a much shorter time frame and getting projects out the door and permitted.
Russell, did you have anything to add?
I was just going to indicate that, as Scott mentioned, that prior to IDCO, there were 4 city staff plan checkers. I was added due to IDCO, and we are currently at 6 staff plan checkers. All of them do single family and commercial, though the commercial is limited to what their background engineering degree is, whether they're a licensed professional or not. But all of them do single family reviews. And then there was the question regarding raised foundation heights. There's nothing in the code that quantifies a maximum height. It only quantifies what the minimum height requirements are.
Okay, we will move on to the next person. Noreen, if you can, please go on ahead with your comment and your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. I couldn't unmute earlier. Okay, I sent it in Q&A, so I'll just repeat it. I'll repeat that. I will state the one I just sent. On the FAR, it was mentioned that the FAR has not changed. What exactly is the FAR? Is it 0.35 or 0.40?
Thank you, Noreen, for the question. So floor area ratio, the maximum allowed currently is 0.4 or 40%.
Was it 0.35 at one point, though?
No, it has always been 0.4. The 0.35 comes in when someone wants to not go through a discretionary single family review and build a house at 0.35 and under or at 3,000 square feet. It could be a 2-story house. So someone who comes in with a reduced FAR at 0.35 does not have to go through design guideline checklist. They can just straight away go to the plan check process. They don't have to meet any design related standards. All they have to show is compliance with the FAR, lot coverage, and setbacks, and other non-building related standards in our code that are currently as objective standards within our code. So that is what floor area ratio is right now currently for the city of Burbank.
Okay, is the ADU or ADUs exempt from FAR and lot coverage?
Any new ADU is exempt from FAR and lot coverage.
Oh, well, how does that work then? Does that mean you have suddenly you can cover your entire property?
So there is
between the house and ADUs, especially if 2 ADUs are allowed?
Sure. There is a limit on the square footage of the ADUs as to how much you can build. So if you were to go with both the ADU option, the junior ADU is at 500 square feet and it has to be part of your house. And the detached ADU, depending upon the number of the bedrooms, for a 2-bedroom, it's 1,000 square feet. So you wouldn't be able to exceed that square footage.
Okay. And then another one, this is one I put in Q&A too. Can you give some examples of how the existing standards have been an impediment for people who wanted to remodel their house? I mean, because I'm a little confused because it seems like the report is bunching together remodels with new construction. So can you give some clear examples of what people have been experiencing other than the wait time, which I understand, but what prompted the city or the staff to initiate these changes?
Well, these changes are a direct result of the feedback from homeowners and applicants and architects who've had issues with prolonged timeline is the big one. The second one is interpretation of the guidelines, because right now, as if you read them, they're subjective. And oftentimes an applicant would have a different interpretation than the member of the staff. And that leads to a lot of back and forth, adding time to the process. And then in general, a discretionary review process is lengthy than a streamlined review process. So all the factors together add more time. The reason why this was initiated was because of the council directive that was given back in 2017 when they updated the code, council wanted for us to come back and give them a report on how effective it is. Based on all the feedback that we received, and based on especially homeowners trying to build a single-story addition up to 500 to 700 square feet, which is unfortunately visible from the street, and then they have to go through a discretionary review process. We prepared a report to the council, as you might have seen on our website, sort of giving them a list of things that worked, that did not work, and how we are retaining all the design guidelines as objective standards.
Thank you very much. And before we move on to the next person, if you can, just ask all your questions up front, and then we will just answer them in the order that you asked them. Next person will be Simon. If you can, Simon, go on ahead with your comment and or question.
There you go. There you go. 1 second. I'll start by saying I feel it's we use a little more time than 3 minutes. It's not really a lot to try to retain your quality of life, but maybe you can come back if there's time. So far, there's still a lot of people that I talk to don't know that this is happening, so they're kind of surprised by it. It's going to take a few minutes to read my height questions, and there's other stuff like the city of Burbank trees. So come back to me if you get a chance. I was denied access to public records on February 18th to try and see details of the projects the staff is claiming are unbuildable. Burbank residents are welcome to contact me through Facebook if they'd like to see those reasonable requests. So would you please provide the data that I asked for, especially any project numbers where lowering the lot would have been illegal to build a second story to the current legal maximum. If you give me a few minutes later, I can explain to you why I think voters will dislike the changes in the two-story top of plate or height. And our concern is how top of plate affects neighbors. Some more code questions, but I got to move on to process. So the staff's proposed position is to streamline the speed of the approval of all projects. I think we should have a report on the process and administration before voting only on code changes to know if the code is really the main problem. If you allow me, I can talk about my conversation with Glendale Planning Supervisor Brad Calvert. I'm happy to talk about that and ask if Burbank can make the same personnel changes and the structural changes to clear their backlog. I have internal city documents from the 2018 project that I appealed here, and it appears the applicants can make, in this case, over 8 rounds of corrections with plan returns. If we go over them and compare them to, say, the slowest 5 projects and the fastest ones since 2017, it seems like you could really find ways to speed up plan check. I'm prepared to speak about how pricing affects our wait times of projects. For that 2-story project I appealed, there were 3 plan returns for only 1 flat rate before the appeal and 5 more, it looks like, for another flat afterwards. While other projects might need only maybe 1 or 2 while people are waiting in line, that's all the same price. This should not continue. If applicants had to pay additional fee to recheck information that is objectively published, like getting the height correct, which was the issue in that initial submission, it would save the planner's time. So it seems like our pricing could be more fair and made to incentivize speed. Same with hourly third-party plan check. My question there is everyone's money is pooled together in the general fund. So do applicants pay the general fund back dollar for dollar? If not, is it possible to say that non-homeowners are helping to pay for property owners' land development? The same thing with regular plan check, but the cost is spread around both diligent and, for lack of a better word, like inattentive designers who need lots of corrections. How many appeals have been filed because the applicant themselves were denied their plan set? And if there are none, do all 2-story homes of equal square footage take the exact same time to check? If not, why would staff return a plan more than 3 times, as in the case shown in the internal documents I have from the house I appealed? Also, final question, for the 6 appeals you mentioned, were all of those single-family development appeals? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamill. Some of your comments were comments, and I guess your questions regarding the proposed updates included the appeals by applicants. So we received 6 appeals that were appealed by the neighbors, not the person who's building the project. And then the second question was, yes, all of them are single family appeals, not the hillside. All of them are SFSDP appeals. And then your other question was regarding pricing, and then I'm not sure.
There was a question about fees, and the applicants do pay a fee for us to process their applications. It is a flat fee that the applicants pay, and that fee is established by the council. So it's one for a single family development permit. There's a flat fee that is provided by the applicant to review.
And regarding the back and forth that you had a question about, why does it take for someone to get to the code compliant plan, for someone 3 rounds and for someone 1 round? It is again case by case. There is no general answer. As I mentioned before, it depends on the scope of the project, the applicant and his knowledge of the code, and in general, the whole, also the neighbors, so the whole appeal process. So the whole timeline is determined by numerous factors. It's not just one thing that determines the timeline.
Shipra, can you also just maybe if we recall, if not, we'll have to do it as part of a follow-up response. But can you just clarify, I believe over the last 2 years, we've had, I think it's 78 applications that have gone through discretionary review. Of those, how many have been additions and how many have been new construction, where it's a tear down and a new construction project?
Sure. So in the past 2 years, we've had, I'm going to stop my screen share momentarily to access the Excel sheet. So in the past 2 years, the staff did the analysis of all the single family permit that we received, 78 in total. And of that, the new construction of 2-story homes were 20 and 1-story homes were 3 that went through this process. All the rest of those single family permits were additions that were initiated by homeowners. So these are additions ranging from 500 to say 700 or 900 square feet, and they're definitely initiated by homeowners. The rest of the single family permit, which is 30%, which is brand new construction, many of them also from homeowners, and why I'm not saying all of them is because we don't have the data on that. But then, yeah, Fred, so I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think that's helpful just to give it context. And I think, part of it is currently how many are in the queue. And I think Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're currently processing about 15 of those applications through a combination of staff internally as well as the consultants assisting in that effort. But I just wanted to kind of note those because I think there was a question regarding, the level of effort, what we're reviewing over the last 2 years. It runs the gambit. The majority of them are add-ons or remodels that are getting caught beyond those that go beyond the 3,000 or 0.35 FAR. But just wanted to note that because I believe we've noted that before in presentations before the public at the board and or council. So I just wanted to make sure that provide some context as well.
Next person, we are going to try to come back to you, Bind or Bindi. If you can, please go on ahead and ask your question or your comments.
No, ma'am, we can't hear you.
Maybe X, if we can ask Bindi to maybe put it in the Q&A so that we can get to her question or get to their question.
Okay, not a problem at all. We will move on to the next person. Ara, if you can, please unmute and go on ahead and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time and for making this forum available for comments. Myself, I'm a homeowner who's currently one of the 15 projects going under review. I just want to speak to a couple of these things. So I'm a lifelong Burbank resident, been here since '89. Finally have a chance to buy a house in Burbank and try to remodel and build something that's more to our liking. The process has been long, of course. Everyone's already aware of that. I acknowledge that people have concerns about some of these changes. I've actually paid attention to the planning board meetings from October forward, and I really understand that, we're going through the process in real time. There are a lot of ambiguities to the code. I've called the city 4 times maybe to understand how tall of a sidewall I can make because the reference grade is not clear. And so some of these things will save both the homeowner and the city staff a lot of time and back and forth on just clarifying ambiguities in the code, which I highly appreciate. Secondarily, a recent caller asked about why some houses are unbuildable. I'll raise my hand. My house is unbuildable. I'm on a lot that has a 7-foot slope from right to left. I'm not on the hillside. And so if I start from the upper side and I draw a straight line where I set my foundation, I'm going to have a 4-foot or a 5-foot raised foundation on the left side of my lot. Once you go up 4 or 5 feet from the ground and you have a 20-foot height requirement, you can't even make 8+8 ceilings. So that's just not buildable. The other alternative is I can depress my garage and make it significantly below the curb height, which is A, counter to the code and I think illegal. And then B, just doesn't make sense because then I'm going to have flooding in my garage. So there's a lot of things here that I think these changes rectify, let alone the streamlining and the acceleration of the process entirely. But the top plate height restriction, I understand there's concerns about massing and all of that. It's not making the house taller. It's just allowing for a straight floor, not to have step down in the middle of my lot, in the middle of my house, so that I can just have a flat raised foundation and then build from there. Otherwise, I have to have 3 steps going down in the middle of the floor just to meet the 20-foot height requirement, and that's no longer a flat floor, obviously. So some of these things really are affecting real people, and I appreciate the city's efforts to get these fixed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ara.
Next, we will go on to Chris. Please, Chris, go on ahead with your comment and or question.
Thank you. I just wanted to simply say, and if you can confirm, that you can build 1,500 square feet between a junior ADU and a regular ADU by right in 60 days, but you're in the queue for 18 months for 700 square feet. The second thing I'd like you to confirm is that under the new proposed ordinance, second-story additions are more restrictive than the current code. And lastly, it seems that since you tried changing the code 5 years ago, it really hasn't worked because the wait times that have mounted up. So obviously changing something or tweaking something would be advisable. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And just to respond to that, yes, you can have 1,000 square feet ADU and a 500 square feet junior ADU, which needs to get approved or must be processed by within 60 days of submission. And a single family special development permit takes anywhere between 12 to 18 months. That includes a 700 square feet addition to a home if it's visible from the street. Under the updated regulation, the second story addition would be more restrictive because there won't be any exceptions for those homes that want to go in with a reduced FAR or square footage. So the second story modulations would be applicable to all second story additions. And regarding the wait times, that would reduce because we are removing ambiguity from the existing code and taking all the design guidelines that we have and basically codifying them as objective standards. So we are maintaining the same regulations on mass and bulk, but at the same time making it easier for homeowners to get a permit for 700 square feet addition sooner than 18 months. around 3 to 8 months with the updated code. That's what we're anticipating.
And just to clarify, if these code amendments are adopted, everyone would go through the same review process. Currently, we have some applicants who have to go through the single family development review process if they meet certain triggers in the code. And once they get through that, then they have to go to building plan check. So it's like a 2-step process. With this, it would be, we planning staff would review the objective standards as part of the building permit review. So it would be done during the plan check process. So that's part of the reason why there would be a saving in time with review of projects.
Moving on, it looks like we have one more person who's looking to speak. Andrew, if you can, please go on ahead with your comment and or questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Hey, great. Good evening. I just wanted to thank city staff and city council for taking up these amendments. I'm a city homeowner in the city of Burbank. We did a remodel on our home when we bought it in 2020. And we'd like to do an addition next year. As our family is growing, we need more space. And just as I was looking into the permitting process and the single family development permit, I learned about these changes. So I was very excited to hear that the process will hopefully be approved and be changed so that it will take, 6 to 8 months instead of a year and a half to get the permits approved and the building going on the home. So I want to thank everyone. And it seems to me that everything that has been proposed in terms of changes is just implementing stuff that was already in place. And all that's being really changed is that your neighbors can't complain and appeal you wanting to build on your home. All the same building codes are being implemented. So I guess that's more of a comment than a question. My question would be, were any of those appeals that went through over the single family development process in the past, you mentioned 6 of them, were any of those actually successful and, essentially stopping a home from being built? That's it. That's all I had. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. I think those appeals resulted in tweaking or modification to the design.
Yeah, there was an appeal that was upheld. There's been appeals upheld by the council in the past.
Moving on to the next person, Sue Clearman. If you can, go on ahead with your comment and our questions.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, first of all, I've been sending a number of questions. I don't know if you have received them in the Q&A. Just a lot of questions about the number of projects, the number of single family development projects, active applications, so on and so forth. And I think that information is really helpful to the public, because that's what we're trying to understand, is how these changes are needed based on the results of what's being approved. What we're seeing out there are projects that are more compatible. They do help enhance the neighborhood compatibility, the ones that go through. But what I see the challenge is all the projects are being lumped into the same workflow. You've got appeals, not appeals, but ADU projects and small additions, and everything's going through the same workflow. So let me just kind of put out here, in looking at the staff city planning website, I see there's roughly 38 single family special development projects listed. And the majority of these are being reviewed by a consultant planners, or they're unassigned. For whatever reason, again, I think this is more of a workflow process issue. Why a small addition should get held up. And this is, again, it's a small number out of the 650 active projects. But again, I would love to share my screen with you and confirm the list, the information from the city website. Unfortunately, I can't do that with this format. It doesn't allow an exchange of information. I'd like to get that information and review it. And there's also pending projects that show dates and so on. But the point is also, things like COVID. I'm sure COVID has got a great impact on delaying projects. So with that, again, I know that you're talking about changes that are in the works, or not in the works, but proposed. But really, we don't see how eliminating the single-family special development review process will enhance the neighborhood compatibility or residential neighborhoods. I would like to reach out to staff and request a meeting with members of the planning department to review these questions and share information. Examples as showing how it's working, or that, like you said, if there's roadblocks, what those might be. Before we change the code or make any drastic changes, it looks like those proposed changes were made without community input. I hear you said that applicants and homeowners, those are people that are having pending projects. Again, I would hate to see a small project getting held up, but these big projects where you're talking about total house teardowns, and somebody said earlier about, how trying to get their project to fit on a sloped lot. Well, that might require grading or some work to make the to make the house fit the lot versus what they're trying to make the lot.
Thank you very much, Sue. Your 3 minutes are up. We'll move on to the next person, or if you want to go ahead and answer a question.
Yeah, thank you, X. Thank you for your question, Sue. So I'll just answer the couple of questions that you brought up regarding the code changes. So grading on a slope lot, the way our code reads is that for any measurement of any height, including top of the plate height, it's measured from either the natural grade or the finished floor, whichever is lower. So what that does is that it makes it very restrictive for someone to alter the grade and get a different measurement for the top of the plate or top of the roof height. And the main intent behind this change, top of the plate change, which is the only change that is being implemented or being proposed as a part of this project, is 20 to 22 feet. And the intention behind that is to provide homeowners flexibility, especially given that a majority or many of the homes within Burbank are built on raised foundation or have a sloping lot, which is hard to accommodate for, given the reference grade for measuring height for a home. Secondly, we are not eliminating any design guidelines. So I just want to reiterate that again. What we are changing is we are changing the process. We are making it streamlined because we are now taking all the design guidelines and making them as codified objective standards within the code. So all the design guidelines, a separate checklist that you have, everything within that, like I showed in my presentation, is essentially going to get or become a part of our code, which is going to be reviewed. When a planner reviews a plan, he or she is going to make sure that each of those objective standards are being met before any kind of approval. So we are not eliminating any design guidelines. In fact, we are requiring even those homes that are under 0.35 and 3,000 square footage to go through a design review process in the way of objective design standards. So what we are changing is the process, not the standards. And the only standard that has been added, which is a little different, is which was not there in the design guideline, is the top of the plate height, and that is from the direct feedback as a result of the direct feedback from homeowners. And then I guess those were the questions you had regarding the R1 code. Scott, did you have any more? If you wanted to chime in.
No, there's nothing else to add. You captured everything.
We will move on to the next person, Emily Gabaletti. If you can, please go on ahead with your questions and or comments.
Thank you. I want to take a look at a little bit different part of this. I have a question and a second question. The first question is real simple. Are ADUs exempt from these standards?
What's your second question, ma'am? Just ask all the questions and I'll respond.
The second question has to do with the new standard that's proposed for a 20-foot wide driveway. It's a garage is behind the house.
Okay. What is the question there?
Well, the question is, what is the justification to permit widening these driveways from 12 feet to 20 feet? And I ask that because widening them will eliminate planting areas for ground cover and trees, and it doesn't help fight climate change. So if it's a good idea, why not have that additional width require that the driveway be paved with permeable surfaces so that we still get the benefit of stormwater infiltration and the possibility of planting between the grass creek so that we have a more climate sensitive approach?
Okay, thank you for your questions. The first question, ADUs have their own standards, and that's because of the state law. ADUs, the plan, including the timing for the planning review, is all governed by the state law. So yes, they have their own standards, and those are within our code. It's available online. And the second question regarding the driveway. So the 20 feet expansion of the driveway was initiated to provide options for off-street parking, given the recent developments of ADU. But however, we were very cognizant of the fact that we need to maintain landscaping within the front yard setback. So a property owner would not be able to expand their driveway to 20 feet if they cannot meet the minimum required 45% or 55% landscaping requirement for the front yard. So 20 feet driveway can only be allowed on lots where a homeowner can show that they're meeting the 55% landscaping requirement and can accommodate a 20 feet wide driveway. And we have regulations within our code which governs the kind of landscaping you can have to ensure that there's sufficient permeable surface in the front yard of each lot within Burbank. And I just wanted to add, we are not touching the curb cut or the driveway apron, the approach. That is going to remain the same, the width of it. And that is to make sure we have enough area, or we have the existing area for on-street parking. We continue to maintain that. Those were the answers.
Shipra, maybe, yeah, Scott, if you can add on the ADUs and also what the turnout will do, especially now with limitations on requiring on-site parking as part of projects that include ADUs.
Right. I just want to clarify that we are not changing the amount of required pervious surface. So it's going to remain at 55%. That is not changing. What we're doing is giving people more flexibility with providing on-site parking. So if they want to do on-site parking, say if they want to build an ADU, then they have that flexibility. And so you wanted to mention the ADU?
Yeah, just to clarify, I think Ms. Gabeletti asked the question of development standards that would be applicable to single-family residents versus those that were limited to applying under an ADU, which in general would be, we are significantly limited in the standards that we can apply. They have different requirements for setbacks, how far we can push overall architectural design on an ADU, but maybe if you can talk a little bit about that as what it would compare to under our current standards for a single family addition, and why in some examples, I think we've had people that have looked at the single family residential process and as a result of that, considered doing an ADU in lieu of an actual residential addition.
And that's correct, Fred. I think one of the most important differences is per state law in our code, we have a shot clock to review and approve an ADU, which is 60 days. ADUs have less requirements because, again, we have to follow state law, and we implemented state law into our code. So state law just simply talks about setback, height. If you're within half a mile of parking of a major bus stop or major transit, you don't have to provide on-site parking. So the standards are much more straightforward than our R1 standards. So people have opted because of the timeline and because of the simplicity of the ADU standards, have opted to build ADUs. And those ADUs are exempt from overall FAR. So someone can build in ADU and not be subject to the city's FAR limitations in the R1 district.
And last but not least, I think the other component to that is that all ADUs are ministerial, right? They're not appealable.
That's correct. Which means that we have to approve it. To meet all the standards, the city is obligated to approve ADUs.
Moving on to the next person. Mike, if you can, please unmute and ask your question and or comment.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm just wondering why the city of Burbank allows two-story homes, but not two-story ADUs. And also, with regard to ADU, cities
Mike, you're breaking up. If you could repeat your question.
Yes, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is regarding ADUs. I'm wondering why the city of Burbank allows two-story homes, but not two-story ADUs. And many cities allow accessory dwelling units that are built above garages with an entrance off an alley to overhang the minimum rear setback. Can you help me understand why Burbank does not allow the ADU above a garage to overhang the rear setback?
Okay, so your questions are related to ADU regulations that City of Burbank has in place. The first one that you mentioned was, why do we not allow two-story ADUs, but we're okay with two-story homes? Well, that's a question not pertaining to the R1 regulations, and those are the standards to make sure that ADUs, since we don't have a lot of say in terms of the design, that they are maintained at one story. I guess that's why the city has it in place. And regarding the overhang, I'm not sure which part of the code you're referring to. And we have a straight 4 feet setback requirement from the state law as well for ADUs. A lot of things with ADUs are dictated by, most of the things for ADU are dictated by state law. So the overhang one, Mike, I'm not sure. If you can type it in the Q&A, we will get back to you with the answer. Yeah.
We will continue on. It looks like Mr. Casey, you had another question or comment. Go on ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. I did want to comment on the EDU situation. It's really not part of this conversation tonight. And so comparing apples and oranges here, the state's mandating it got to be done in 60 days. So I hope we take that off the table for tonight. It sounds like the changes to this are all being requested by applicants that are trying to build. There hasn't been a groundswell from the community that's dissatisfied with the design guidelines. And because I think almost none of the staff that are on this phone call were here during the IDCO or during the drafting of the single family design guidelines, it's important to remind you that bulk and mass seems to be what you're focused on when the entire thrust of this was compatibility. And so taking out the design review eliminates an opportunity other than mathematical to look at a property and say, that seems compatible with this neighborhood, that doesn't. And because the majority of that review is required by the builder or the homeowner, I can see why they wouldn't want to do it. The reason IDCO came about and the reason that we have the single family design guidelines we have today is because homes were getting huge, massive. They were towering over neighbors' homes. They were blocking views, blocking daylight. And so I'm hearing things sneaking back in. Looks like we're going to a rear-facing garage. That wasn't one of the complaints. The complaint was the size of the building. And so now just saying, well, because the garage is in the back, we're going to give you another 200 square feet to play with. So there are things here that really contradict the incentive or the intention of the IDCO and the single family design guidelines. There was, I guess the other thing is, if you're now saying you're going to add modulation requirements to all of the projects that are currently not covered, how is that going to streamline the process? It sounds like it's going to make it more challenging for even more projects. For the gentleman that called in, and I absolutely feel for him, he's got a 7-foot grade change from one side of the property to the other. These are the kind of conditions where people request a variance. The idea of granting everybody an extra 2 feet to accommodate one person, and the most shocking answer I got tonight is that there is no limit to the size of a raised foundation. We have photos of properties that have been sitting on 6-foot pedestals. And so some of these things, to resolve one person's issue, give the rest of the building community, builders, an extra 2 feet to play with. And they're going to take it. We know that. We've seen that happen in the past. So thank you for the opportunity for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. So the first question regarding the streamlining and bulk and mass. So I'm going to show you the design guidelines, and I'm just going to go through it very fast. So the way the neighborhood compatibility checklist currently is applied by staff is by using the checklist that you see on your screen. The picture below is the table that we actually use for making the findings. All these findings, front yard setback, side yard setback, and the rear yard setback. This one deals with the front entry orientation, design, and height, garage orientation and design, so on and so forth, pitched roof, flat roof, and since I already went through it, I'm not going to read it out again, but all of these have been incorporated as objective standard. Why is it streamlined? It's streamlined because it's removing ambiguity. When I say objective standard, for example, the neighborhood compatibility checklist recommends that your front porch be subordinate in height, but it does not really specify how much subordinate and what should be the height, what should be the dimensions. Now we are putting in place objective standards, which gives direction to a homeowner that you need to have it at 12 feet. And these are the minimum dimensions that you'll have to comply with for a front porch. Regarding the bulk and mass, with the bulk portion and the mass portion, the intent behind this whole streamlining process was to make sure that the design guidelines that the staff worked on 5 years ago gets preserved and gets codified within our code. So as you can see, we are not removing any of the existing design standards from the code. What we are doing is, you can go through the checklist. What we are doing is, we are taking it, making them an objectified standard or codified into an objective standard so that it's easier for staff to explain to the applicant or a homeowner, and it's easier for them to understand. And that would reduce the ambiguity and the back and forth that happens so often, because we've had projects where we've gotten back that, no, we want to have this front porch height because this is how it says subordinate, it doesn't say how much. And this is just one example that I'm stating from the neighborhood compatibility checklist. Regarding blocking light and blocking view, within the hillside, the views would be preserved because we still have the hillside development permit. Outside of the hillside, there is currently no such requirement to preserve the views. Regarding the light, for all the homes where the facades are facing the street, we have put in place standard which requires at least 20% of the facade to be windows. So that would ensure that the home has light. And secondly, honestly, there is nothing within the neighborhood compatibility checklist right now which talks about how light should not be blocked for the neighbors. There is no standard that talks to that. So we've never made findings to that where it says, oh, this house is high enough to block the sunlight of the neighbor, so we cannot. This is more based on the objective standards within the code, which is 20 feet and 30 feet top of the roof height. The 22 feet height increase has been done again to help out the homeowners, because oftentimes variances are not easy to make findings for. Variance can be granted as the last resort if the lot renders itself completely unsuitable for any kind of structure which your neighbors seem to enjoy. So the findings for variance is restrictive, and we don't really have enough cases where someone comes in with a variance request and we are able to make findings for that. And again, how is it going to streamline the process? Because it is going to reduce the back and forth with the applicant. It is going to remove the discretionary review process. It's going to make it essentially black and white. You either comply with it or you don't. And so it's going to be part of the plan check process, where we can, during our planning review, make sure plans comply with the objective standards.
And Shipra, and I'll just add one more thing on the variance. As you mentioned, the variances are kind of a last resort, a relief, where it addresses some sort of physical characteristic with the property. But if you have a repeat issue, in particular, if there are these type of grade deviations across multiple properties, then the solution isn't the variance. The solution is to amend the code, and that is what is being considered tonight, presented to the public, and then also being considered by the council as part of this process, is to account for that and do it so that it's an objective standard, as opposed to going through a secondary discretionary process for variances where where it's not as clear cut, where we're now having to make different findings. And like I said, just from a planning standpoint, you want to shy away from variances and you want to address deficiencies in the code through code amendments, and that is what's before tonight, being presented to the public, as well as what's being considered by the council.
We will move on to the next person. Simon Hamill, if you would like, please go on ahead with your comment or question.
Thanks. Thank you for the chance to follow up, because I have some stuff based off of what you said. So based on what Mr. Ramirez just said, can we get project numbers and so we can see an exact number of the cases where you're saying it's being repeated over and over again? It'd be interesting to see what those are. I can also show examples. Again, we might need another forum where people did successfully build, at least on a front to back slope, without modifying the land at all, meaning they got a 2-story home out of it. So those kind of slopes can be successfully built, 2-story, brand new construction, by the way. I want to ask if the council's still allowed to make changes to this stuff. And I also would point out that our current height saves the view in an objective fashion, which is normally not, you can't talk about view usually legally. However, if something's shorter than something else, obviously you could see past it, so that it's a free, objective, universal protection of view. And then my concern, which got my attention on this whole thing, is how this will affect my house. And I've been bringing people here to show them. My neighbor behind my house, I'm on a corner lot, so I have people behind me and to the side. They're uphill by, I don't know, 6 inches, half a foot or something. And they're on a little raised foundation. And they're already quite a bit taller, and it's a single-story home. So my question there is like, what do we say to people where somebody's just a little bit uphill, then they build a high raised foundation or a crawl space, and then on top of it, or I guess just raised foundation, but then on top of that, they build this new second story. You have people staring down in your backyard, and this will be universal across the city, from an extra 2 feet higher in the air, because of what appears to be a handful or two of cases. Until we see numbers on these cases and you can look at the plans, I'm going to assume it's like 5 or less or 6 or less, where grading would just be totally illegal. But I think we allow the lowering of lots everywhere to accommodate for that. Plus, also in the front to back situations, there's nothing preventing anybody from building their whole house in the back of the lot behind the slope. May not be what everyone wants, but that comes with buying a home and looking to see if you can do what you want when you buy. I had to hunt around so I could build a swimming pool, because there was a lot of lots where I couldn't build a swimming pool just based on our laws. I passed up a couple of good houses because it seemed like it wouldn't work with the law. Anyway, thanks for taking my comments, and maybe we could address if the council can still change this.
Thank you, Mr. Hamill. Regarding the views, again, I would want to reiterate that on non-hillside lots, we don't really have currently any requirement to make findings for views. Secondly, again, the intent of the 2 feet height increase is to help out homeowners with raised foundation, where majority of the houses in Burbank are built on raised foundations, and also help out people built on slope lot to accommodate a desirable or 8 to 10 feet interior ceiling height. And regarding the council, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they can still make changes to.
Yeah, they still can make changes, and with regards to the raised foundation, have to remember that the overall height is not changing for the structures. It's still going to be 30 feet. Mm-hmm. So that is not changing in any way with these design standards. So the height is still going to be limited. The overall height is still limited for construction of single family homes.
And for screening, we are proposing an objective standard derived from the design guidelines to make sure if a homeowner qualifies for a certain sort of, or proposes a certain kind of addition, they will have to provide screening in that case. So we made sure everything in the design guidelines is being carried forward as objective standards.
Moving on to the next person, Sue Clareman. Please go on ahead and ask your question and our comment.
Thank you again, and thank you, Shipra. Again, we're talking about examples of top plate height. There's an excellent example of a house that was designed to fit the lot. The lot is sloped. It's in Glendale, and it required grading, but that's where it's not a matter of raising the foundation or putting it on a platform. But that's something that I would like to see more of an interactive meeting with members of the community and staff to present real world examples and show how the proposed changes, if they may help or they may actually destroy neighborhood compatibility. That's how we got here 5 years ago. Again, I feel for the homeowners that have been waiting in line, but to say let's make these changes and to say they're objective, they're not objective. They're not proven. But the changes that you are proposing are not proven. Where the existing single-family special development permit process is proven. And if there are delays or process problems, are those problems due to staffing? Remember, we had COVID. That threw a lot of things out there. Consultants are now reviewing these projects. The last time staff had training was back in 2017 with the consultant that was hired to put together the single-family special development permit process and design guidelines. Has there been any training since then? Again, I think we have to look at this from a big picture approach and not just look at changing the code to make these projects without a review process. So I hope there's an interactive opportunity.
Thank you, Sue, for your comments. Regarding the objective standards, so essentially what the objective standards are, they are measurable, they are uniformly verifiable. That is the very definition of objective standard that the state law has. So we are putting in place, when we say it's objective, it's different to say it's proven. Proven, I don't understand what that means, but objective standards are measurable. They are uniformly verifiable, and we exactly know the impact that they will have once it's built. So those are objective standards. And whatever we have right now as a part of single family, they are not objective because they are not measurable. They are open to interpretation differently by city staff or even between city staff. They're open to different interpretations. And that causes a lot of confusion and discussion, adding on to the review time. Staff training, whenever we have, and Scott, if you want to chime in. We
do train our staff to go through the code. They go through thorough training because the staff has to explain the code every day.
Yes.
They have to explain it to the public. They have to process the applications. So there is training that's involved with our staff when they come on board, not only just for DR1, but for the entire code. So they are trained to implement our code. And again, just to emphasize, we understand there are standards that work, and we're keeping those standards. Those standards are remaining here in the code. And the standards that were once not required, they were in the checklist, are now, we have implemented those in the code as well. And every applicant who has to who for an R1 addition or a new home has to go through the same standards. In the past, or currently, the way the code's written is there are exemptions where you don't have to go through the single family special development permit, and there's some standards you don't have to abide by. But now everyone has to go by the same standards.
And one last thing I'd like to add to, as far as, you mentioned training, Scott, and also, which is key, and it's an ongoing training. I want to bring the public's attention to the fact that though SHPRA is presenting basically the staff findings and what's been recommended to the board and what's recommended to council, the actual review of the code, as I mentioned, is an effort that's been going underway for 5 years now, since the code amendment was adopted back in 2017. And the core group of planners that have been reviewing these applications before we even outsourced some of that work to consultants to help with workload are the same people that actually were part of the internal group that reviewed the code requirements and made the recommendations that you see before you. So they are well thought out. They are based on real world feedback and input during application submittals and review. Instead of choosing 2 or 3 from a guideline, as SHPRA noted, we're incorporating those guidelines as objective standards that can be verified, can be measured. So that's one piece. But the other thing is that we're also now applying it. So there are no exceptions to plane-based modulations to the design guidelines. They're being incorporated and applied to every project, from an addition to new construction, which is not the case currently. So we wanted to make sure to emphasize that as well, is that we're not, I think it was used before, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're keeping the baby and we're making refinements so that we can continue to meet the goals that the community wanted, which was to address bulk and mass and community character. And we're doing it in such a way that it provides a clear understanding to the applicant of what's expected of them if they're going to proceed with an application for single family.
Next person to speak is Aura. If you can, please go ahead with your comment and or question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Just wanted to chime in. A couple of things. One of the callers mentioned that somewhere in a slope lot situation could apply for a variance, and I know that the staff has already responded to that. Just wanted to get some perspective here. So I don't know what the process is for a variance. There is an allowance for a conditional use permit, but as if the process is long enough and expensive enough, that would cost me $6,000 and added to 2 or 3 months at the time when we've explored that. But obviously, that's not a really palatable solution. Secondarily, someone alleged that we didn't do enough diligence before purchasing the lot. That's a big presumption. We did a lot of diligence. We've researched quite a few lots, and I think that's accusatory in a way that I don't appreciate. Thirdly, I'm really just trying to understand what the opposition is really trying to hold on to here, because I'm looking at the design guidelines. I've reviewed them even before we purchased this property. There's a number of things in here, a lot of them pertaining to setbacks, modulations, landscaping, et cetera, et cetera. That's all the stuff that's being now incorporated as objective standards, verifiable standards, measurable standards within the code. The stuff that we're kind of getting rid of is the suggestions of traditional Burbank architectural styles. There was like 7 styles listed. But at the same time, the design guidelines have explicit language that states that use of other architectural styles and expressions, including contemporary architecture, is encouraged. So it's not like the design guidelines restricted developments to these community conforming architectural styles. We're always allowed to produce homes that are outside of these styles to begin with. So it's not like you're losing that because you never had that to begin with. The only thing that the commenters or the opposition is losing per se seems to be the ability to appeal, which frankly is just one consideration. That we shouldn't appease the concern about neighbors' rights to appeal properties, and as a result of that, extend this process to be a timely and costly process for everyone else. Having your voice heard is all well and good, but objective design guidelines can accomplish most of the same ends without having a long, drawn, contentious process. There's one other thing I want to mention, but I forgot. Oh yeah, there was another comment that said that these changes are all designed to meet the needs of applicants, and they're responsive to the applicants' concerns. Sorry, but maybe to state the obvious, that's kind of how the process would unfold. The passive members of the community, people that don't have projects in front of the planning department, have no reason to raise concerns about the existing code. The only people that are going to identify issues with the code are the ones that have projects pending for review. So that's kind of part and parcel to how these processes work. People that have problems with the code are the ones that are interacting with it daily. And so that's just the nature of how any changes to the code would be assessed and identified is by the people that are interacting with the code directly. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Next person, Miles, if you can, please go on ahead with your comment and or question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to comment to express my support for the changes. My wife was born and grew up in Burbank. We bought a house here about 10 years ago. And we went into a remodel, really not having done any of that kind of work before. We're excited about doing it. But in the amount, I think the time and the subjectivity of the review process was really hard to accept as we were going through it. I think it added a lot of time and stress to the permitting process for us. And going into a project and having plans and working with an architect and asking, can we do this and how long will it take? And having the answer be, well, it depends on how they interpret this or that. And you may have to come back if you get one person or another, and it may take longer if you get one person or another. Did not like that. It took too long. We went back and forth. It adds time, it adds stress. And so I think a lot of the changes that this process or that these changes are looking to fix are ones that we would certainly be in support of from having gone through a long and drawn out process of our own. So wanted to voice support for that, and thank you for allowing the comments.
Thank you, Miles.
It actually looks as if we do not have any new individuals who are raising their hand to comment. I don't know if staff would like to add anything before we close this out.
We can go through the Q&A.
Let's do some of the questions if we can.
Okay. There's a lot. To the top of the plate, increase remodulated by objectives, standard and size of the lot, the perceived impact of the neighbors, privacy is lessened. Again, that question talks about the increase in the top of the plate height and its impact on the privacy. So the first thing is we have objective standard that would require a homeowner to modulate the upper story to make sure the bulk is reduced. And secondly, for privacy, we have objective standard for screening requirement that a homeowner will have to comply with if he meets certain criteria. For example, the exact word I think in there is if you have a 2-story home within the 15 feet of the shared property line, then you need to have screening. So that's one of the questions there. Top of my head, I don't have information on number of permits processed per month. Scott, I don't know if you have the information.
Not at my fingertips.
Okay, so we don't have that. We can get back with the response on that. And yes, they will be allowed to, and I'm reading Lindy's question, perhaps this is what she wanted to ask. It would be allowed to go through a ministerial process if these updates get approved. One document reads, as its owner, builder responsibility to be compliant. Well, the city staff will verify compliance of the project a homeowner submits for a single family dwelling. So they have to go through the plan check process, which currently people go through if they're building less than 0.35 or 3,000 square feet. And the building permit is only issued once they comply with all planning, building, and other city department code. I'm not sure about the fourth point you have. How many delays are from owner request for changes? Well, those changes most of the times are in response to the requirement of the code. So the delay results from a different interpretation usually a homeowner might have of a code. And also, if the way they interpreted the code or the way the staff explain the disagreement that comes there causes them to change things that might cause delays. It's it's case by case. It's very hard to generalize it for all the projects. Then regarding the actual under the proposed changes, do homeowners need to post the sign in front of the house announcing the projects and notices? No, that's the part we're essentially making streamlined because now it would be part of the plan check process. So you will still have the notice from the building department, I guess, but for planning and planning, it will be a plan check process if it gets adopted. I'm just randomly reading. We will respond to each of these questions if we have not already done so during the meeting. Other than the state encouraged ADU buildings, what if any effect might these new buildings have on R1 zone properties? The new zoning or the updated zoning code is basically going to continue what we have right now, but in a more streamlined manner. We are actually not changing anything other than the top of the plate height increase. So the regulation of mass and bulk will continue to occur even with the updated regulations. So nothing is being changed. Only thing that would change is it's going to make it faster for a homeowner to obtain permits for his project for a single family dwelling. And it's going to be faster because of the clarity, the ease of understanding, uniform applicability, and verifiability of the objective standards. How does allowing larger garage exemptions for rear-facing garages reduce mass and bulk? The intent, and that is the existing code, the intent behind providing larger FAR exemptions for rear-facing garage was to ensure that it's subordinate in overall mass and bulk. So what it means is that when a pedestrian walks past a neighborhood, garage shouldn't be the main portion of the house that he looks at. It should be subordinate in height, such that it's sort of hidden. So in order to encourage that, or it blends well. So in order to encourage that, the code incentivizes, and that's existing code. It is not an update. It gives a higher FAR exemption if a homeowner chooses to build garages at the back. There is FAR exemption for garages at the front too, but it's lesser. It's 400 square feet. At the back, it's 500. And if you have an alley with a garage with an alley access, it goes up to 600 square feet.
And the purpose of that was to encourage people to set the garages in the back or use the alley for access for the garages. So we got a higher exception for their FAR, and that is in the current code.
Yes, it's all part of the current road. And then I guess we touched upon most of these. Are you removing the right for a neighbor to appeal? Since it would be a ministerial process, yes, you wouldn't be able to appeal a project as the design guideline appeal you have right now, but it makes the process very black and white. If someone doesn't comply with the code, they wouldn't be able to get a building permit. So essentially, all the non-compliance will get captured during the plan check process. Similar to any home up to 0.35, 3,000 square feet, today it goes directly to plan check process. So it's very black and white. It's very objective standards. Either a homeowner complies or he does not, or he or she does not. So yes, it will be part of plan check moving forward if it gets adopted. A lot of these questions we will have to get back with a response because they relate to number of single family. I think we're good. The questions that I haven't responded to, we will create a document responding to those.
Okay, that works. Again, if there are no additional comments from staff, once again, thank you, members of the public, for your comments and questions. We will be going through the Q&As and answering those and placing them on our city website. Once again, thank you all for attending this community meeting. Hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.